Greetings, fellow traveler. Since you're here, how about we talk a little about social issues and how the whole COVID-19 outbreak is affecting them. This is state of emergency, day 28, I think. Haapsalu, Estonia. It's the 9th of August, it's a Thursday. Well, it's actually the 9th of April, not August. It seems like I'm actually somewhat losing my mind. My only relief is that it should be quite common these days, so hey, we're all human. And I took a short drive here to Haapsalu to ponder about how the whole virus situation is affecting the people who are the most vulnerable in our societies. First of all, I'm going to talk about the main subject, the social consequences. Then I'm going to have a Skype interview with one of my dear friends from Barcelona, and who actually has pretty much expertise on her own since she's been active with all social subjects for quite a while now. And I'll finish with a short overview of the recent developments here in Estonia these past few days, as well as the most recent numbers as far as the outbreak is concerned. But first of all, a short introduction about Haapsalu, where I am at the moment, and as you can see, there are these 13th century castle ruins behind me. It's a small town, like most towns in Estonia, about 100 kilometers from Tallinn westwards, and it's like an hour and 15 minutes if you're driving. It's the largest town in Läänemaa or Lääne County and has about 9,000 people living here. Haapsalu is a nice little summer resort, and it's also famous in the country for its healing-oriented spas. Not only that, the rehabilitation center here is, as the website claims, the most contemporary neuro-rehabilitation center in the Baltics and the whole Nordic countries. So Haapsalu is known as a place that literally helps people to get back on their feet, and it seemed like an obvious destination to talk about social issues. Also, every time that I come here, I sort of feel like home. It has like this welcoming aspect to it, it's a small community, but at the same time it's, nice, pleasant, easygoing, relaxed. Lääne County has the second lowest population density in the whole country. That means 10.7 people per square kilometer. And as I'm recording this, the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the county stands at 4. This makes it the least affected county in Estonia as far as the positive cases go. Since Lääne County itself has about 24,000 people living here, then that makes it 1.95 cases per 10,000 capita, which is the second lowest number in Estonia. So the low population density might help to explain why the outbreak is quite modest here, as well as it's, quite modest in the whole country. So, there's definitely something to it. But Estonians are used to being on their own, and this reserved or isolated lifestyle actually suits us pretty good. At the same time, people scattered across the country in small parishes means extra challenges for the local governments, because it's the local governments who are supposed to run the social services, and if you don't really have that much manpower and resources, then in a lot of smaller places, well, it's difficult to say the least. For example, in a lot of smaller villages, it's not uncommon that there's no grocery store, let alone any pharmacies, post offices or ATMs. Which means that people who are living in the countryside these days tend to be quite well off, or at the other side of the spectrum, really, in the bad spots. Most people have personal cars because you can't really rely on the public transportation because of the infrequent schedules. Meaning that, there might be only a couple of buses going from your village to the next nearest town that has a grocery store, and the buses might not fit your own schedule if you're working or studying or whatever. The local governments, of course, are doing their best because they're the ones who are supposed to be helping these people. But in a lot of smaller parishes, there might be only a handful of social workers, even one or two, who are supposed to be responsible for the whole parish. So they have a lot of weight on their shoulders, and understandably these people are doing hard work, and often they're not in the spotlight, though they're on the front lines every day. And well, those people just deserve more credit than they get. Some local governments are creating extra resources from the people who are working for institutions of the city or parish. For example, Tallinn, the capital where I live as well, has created this reserve where you can volunteer And you can help out with people getting groceries, or you can help out by cleaning public places, or you can take part in the municipal police patrols to make sure that the 2+2 rule is being enforced. But you can choose the tasks that the local government offers to you, and usually it's at least like 1 or 2 days ahead that they give you the notice, and then you have time to reorganize your own stuff. It's cold. Nordic living. It was 15 degrees like 2 days ago, and now it's 5. So anyhow, there's also some initiatives to expand the volunteering workforce. For example, Hack the Crisis, the hackathon that was organized by Garage 48 and Accelerate Estonia, besides creating the great webpage koroonakaart.ee that I've been using myself. Then they also created a webpage called kogukondaitab.ee, or the community helps in English. So the website is meant both for volunteers and those who are in need of aid. You can download the Zelos team management app and register to the COVID Help Estonia group. There you can choose an available task, which mostly includes things like helping with groceries or going to the pharmacy or just spreading information. The challenge that they seem to have is actually getting the people who need the aid to use the platform. Because as we know, then a lot of people who this is aimed for are actually senior citizens who might not be that good with technology. Anyhow, it's still a nice initiative, and you can check out if anything like that is being done wherever you live. Or, just do it yourself. Anyhow, the hastily rising unemployment makes it clear that soon there's going to be a lot of people who will be needing some sort of financial and social support in the nearby future. The current unemployment rate stands at 6.6%, which means roughly 42,000 people. The average percent for entire last year was 4.4%, and the highest it's been in recent history was in 2010 during the last major financial crisis, where it made it up to 16.7%. We don't know how far up it's going to go this time, but we do know that the summer in all likelihood is not going to bring that much relief, since hotels and restaurants probably are not counting on this to be your usual touristic summer. Some suggestions were made that people should look more towards the agriculture sector, because the government is, making it more difficult for foreigners to get the jobs. So, hey, local people, maybe, go check out some farming. Which, farming is great. Farming is what keeps us alive. But at the same time, people who are losing their jobs in Tallinn, for example, in, hotel industries or catering, well, in all likelihood, they're not going to go to South Estonia to work on the fields. I mean, it would be a nice world, but I guess it's just that, changing your whole lifestyle is quite difficult, and you'd have to get to very different ways of living. But yeah, making life more complicated for foreigners is very much the policy that you would expect from the neoconservative EKRE and its leader Mart Helme. Problem is that for the agriculture industry, this is, still a big question, how to secure the workforce. And the agriculture industry, understandably, was not that keen on the whole idea of sending third country foreigners out of the country if they lose their jobs, because, they would actually need those helping hands. So it's also not surprising that Helme had to rethink his original plan, and now is planning an exception that even if the foreigners' work permit should end, they can still stay in the country until the 31st of August if they find a job in the agricultural field. But Helme has also strongly expressed his opinion that the whole agriculture sector should be reducing production, because of the drop in demand, and so everybody should get ready for tougher times, which it seems like the state is doing as well. So besides investing, the government is now also working on budget cuts. This is an ideological key point to the Isamaa party, since if all the private sector is forced to make cuts, then why should the public sector be excluded, like they say? The aim of these cuts, after all, would be to redirect the saved money to supporting the private sector, healthcare, and also social assistance. Which I guess sounds understandable, but the question remains that where do you cut the expenses from? Which will be the fields that are going to be affected? Understandably, some non-profit organizations are worried about it, how will this affect their funding, their projects, because it wasn't that long ago that EKRE was quite unsatisfied with the social minister Tanel Kiik for supporting some LGBT groups. Tanel Kiik is quite liberal, and EKRE is pretty much anything but liberal. So yeah, the government seems to have some tough debates ahead of them. I guess this is one of the examples of why it's difficult to make a coalition with EKRE. There was also a major controversy regarding domestic violence. One of their ministers was accused of, being violent against his wife. The thing is still in court. But even though in March the general number of domestic violence cases seemed to be modest, then experts working in the field are worried that this is due to victims now being stuck in the house with the aggressors. That might also make it more difficult for them to ask for help. The number is increasing in April now, as was expected. And this whole thing applies to children as well. So, children who are suffering from violence in their homes, they really don't have the chance to talk to anyone about it, or at least it's more complicated, because in schools, they might have had some friends, teachers, the school psychologists. Well, right now they're just basically stuck at their homes. So people are urged to pay attention to their surroundings, their neighbors. If you hear anything suspicious or violent or see anything, then, report about it and make sure that things don't get out of hand. It was already reported weeks ago when this whole self-isolation period started that this might severely affect people who have problems with mental health, especially people suffering from anxiety disorders or from OCD, since to them, I guess, it's pretty much like a nightmare come true. Boredom can make people more imaginative, but at the same time it can also make people, lose whatever motivation that they had. And for a lot of people who actually count on, their close ones or their family to keep them above water, then I suppose this time is especially difficult. I mean, okay, there's, Skype and Zoom and chats and mails, but, that's a very different thing to actually talking with someone face to face. And the question also remains that, will this affect our social behavior in the long term? And if so, then how? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if people who are more sensitive about this whole thing would be very reluctant in the nearby future to return to shaking hands or hugging. I mean, we're not much of huggers here in Estonia anyhow, so it's going to be even more isolated, I guess. So if you feel that panic is taking hold of you, then, just try to step out of the whole news feed and social media cycle. Take some time off, read a book. Just, look outside the window, for example. It doesn't have to be anything there, and the more pleasant it is, actually, in some cases. And remember that this is not the end of the world. It's just a phase that the world is going through. There have been worse virus outbreaks before, and in all likelihood, this is not going to be the last. The difference is that these days we're living in more caring and more humane societies, meaning that human life is not just discarded that easily. Viruses are as much part of nature as the birds chirping in these trees. And while SARS-CoV-2 is not just like another flu, it's also not the Black Death. So let's not forget that there are a lot of people who are in a lot more complicated situations than us in our homes or parks, if you're still allowed to go to the park. For example, thousands of migrants are still locked in camps and detention centers where they have nothing to do besides waiting. And since the start of the outbreak, a lot of charities and NGOs have had to put their work on hold, which means that the situation of migrants is not getting any better and it's barely making the news cycle anymore. Out of sight, out of mind, it would seem. And the camps and detention centers themselves are potentially, spots for a medical catastrophe. Because the whole social distancing aspects, the whole methods how to avoid the virus spreading really fast, you can't really apply them in those places. The level of medical care is already low there, and there are a lot of people already suffering from previous medical conditions. And that's a very bad combination with COVID-19. The situation is especially troubling on the Greek islands. Manos Logothetis, the Migration Ministry's General Secretary in charge of asylum seekers reception in Greece, has stated that if each of the other 26 EU member states agreed to take in 2,000 people, our problem would be more than settled and I'd be able to empty the islands in a day. Well, solidarity was already quite hard to come by during the whole main wave of the migration crisis back in 2015 and 16, so I'm really not too optimistic about the EU state showing solidarity these days. But this is still a problem that we cannot ignore, and this will show us what Europe and the EU is or isn't. There is solidarity even in the toughest of times. Here in Estonia, our biggest island called Saaremaa has been the most severely hit region in the country. Kuressaare Hospital the hospital in the biggest city of Saaremaa, has raised close to 200,000 euros from just donations. And this is much needed so they can purchase extra ventilators as well as hospital beds. Because the situation is definitely critical in Kuressaare, which also means that unfortunately by now the first person who is working in the healthcare system over there has died because of the virus. Point being that we're all in this together, and we shouldn't just shrug this whole thing off if we're not in the risk group. We can still carry the virus, every one of us, and even do so asymptomatically. So we should do everything we can to make sure that it won't spread. I mean, that's the whole point of the so-called flatten the curve objective. It's to keep our healthcare system still functional, so people who need help for completely different medical conditions still can have that help. And care generally is something that we should pay a lot more attention to. In a small place like Haapsalu here, it's common knowledge that you can't really live without it. We're all vulnerable and we can easily be in the spot that we need support. And that is nothing to be ashamed of. We're all human, we're all temporary beings on this vast planet of ours, this rock that's circling this huge flaming gas star. I mean, we can, help each other out. And there's always new ways to do it. How then, you might ask? Well, I called my good friend Ana, who's originally from Barcelona, and she's been living here in Estonia for quite a few years now. She's an anthropologist and also a teacher these days, so I was curious to know what's her take on the current times and how's life like in Spain these days. So, hello Anna, nice to see you.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
I wanted to call you because I want to talk a bit about how this whole crisis is affecting the people who are most vulnerable. And since I know that you're someone who's very active about all social issues, inequality, and people who are facing injustice, then yeah, that's why I want to talk to you about it. Maybe you can give like a short background about your studies and what have you been researching yourself.
Okay, I studied anthropology in my bachelor's, and I did the bachelor thesis on the refugee situation in Estonia. And then the master's I studied in social mediation, and I did the thesis. I wrote it on a community mediation project in an intercultural space in Barcelona. And now I'm currently writing my PhD, which is about food insecurity and food aid in Tallinn, but I'm just starting.
I can imagine that this time must be especially tough for you because, all of your family and a lot of your friends are in Spain, and you're like, I guess, stuck in this limbo or between different worlds. How has this been for you? How much are you still keeping in contact with your family and friends, and has this changed during these weeks?
Yeah, in a way, with my family, we have increased the communication. So we talk more than before because it's been almost a month already. And at first, I think it was harder. I felt like an urge to be there, even if I wouldn't be able to do anything or help anyone, but just to be there. But right now, I think I'm fine. It's just this feeling sometimes when you have migrated that you are like when your roots are not clear or you don't have roots anymore. But yeah, in this situation, I think I've been grateful to be in Estonia, where I can at least go outside to the street, because in Spain, otherwise I would just be in four walls.
You also mentioned that you're working on your PhD about food safety. Do you know how the situation is in Tallinn these days with the whole food bank organization?
Yes, actually the food bank is still operative and the people are still receiving food. One of the good things is that the restaurants are donating much more. The food bank works in two different ways. One is the delivery to homes, so this continues the same way. And then when the people are coming to the food bank, to the warehouse to collect their food items. This has changed in a way that now every person who comes there is scheduled in a certain time, which means that instead of starting at 3 in the afternoon, they start at 9 in the morning. And then it's like during the whole day when people are coming and the bags are already prepared for big families, medium families, and small families. And one of the issues that we were expecting is that maybe when they come, they can actually choose which items they want from a selection, and now they cannot because they get the bags already made, and there has not been any time to consider their tastes or what they need or the food. And basically it is very efficient, but it is very efficient to the people to whom it reaches, but it doesn't reach everybody who needs it. And right now the system is through social services, who recommend the people to attend to food bank, and we get some kind of name and data on the size of the household, but nothing much else.
About social services, could you maybe talk about how they've been reorganizing their work in Spain, for example? And I also read something about they're thinking about implementing basic income there. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, about the basic income, there are two suggestions right now on the table, but nothing is sure that it will be approved in the end. In this sense, it's just something that had been talked already in the past, and we just picked it up now. There are two possibilities. One is that every working person or every person in age of working gets 1,000 euros per month until more or less for 6 months, until the pandemic is going to be really settled, they hope. Or the other option is that they give 3,000 to every person and to give back the year after. But who gives it back? If, for example, you are a civil servant and you didn't lose any money, you will give it back entirely. If you are self-employed and your company went bankrupt, then you don't give it back at all. And this would mean, the second option would mean less than 1% of the Spanish GDP. So actually it's totally doable. And I think it's a measure that it's immediate and it's very efficient for the current times. And the other one is even better, but it would imply the 11% of the GDP. And I think that the government's not going to go for that one. As everywhere, the people who have been most affected are the people who were already vulnerable before this situation. But in this sense, I can speak mostly about Barcelona because it's the example I know better. And there I'm actually really glad on how they have reacted to social problems. Maybe not in terms of health but socially, I think that it's been very fast response and very, very effective. And basically there's been different programs. One is for situations of domestic violence. So for example, now the hotels are empty, so they are using some of the hotels to give housing to women or women with children, or to separate from the aggressor in this case. Another thing is that they have habilitated pavilions or sport halls for homeless people. So right now 1,100 people are living in pavilions, which are they have heating, they have food, they have comfortable beds. And then they have also organized different sport halls to homeless people with addictions. And there they are also receiving treatment. So in a way, isn't it a bit paradox that these kind of solutions would have been also very helpful even without a global pandemic? But this global pandemic is giving the scenario to do it fast. And in a way, we can see some bright sides or consequences of this situation.
Yeah, that's very well put, because Tanel Kiik, the social minister, has himself said the same thing a few weeks ago, that okay, now people are asking about everyone who's basically without families and who are alone, but this goes on the whole time. Why is nobody talking about it before?
Yeah.
That's a very good point, and it actually does sound like Barcelona is really doing a lot of great initiatives.
Yeah, our current government in Barcelona is eco-feminist. And that's just a word, but for me what it implies is a lot. It's much bigger than just a word. And I really like the way that they are putting a concept or a value that has been very, very carried out by women in our history, which is care. And I mean, what are we learning now? That caretaking is one of the most important, like, not only jobs, but like activities we can do right now to give it and to get it. And I really hope that after this we learn a bit about that and we kind of all integrate it into our daily life.
Can you maybe describe the restrictions in Spain in a bit more detail, and what's life looking like there at the moment?
Mm-hmm. So basically you can't go to the street unless you have like a permission, or you are like I think it's like 50 or 100 meters from your home. So this means that you are near a supermarket, but if they would see you outside of that determined area, then they would give you a fine and you would have to pay. Traveling within the country is also not allowed without a specific like permit, and you have to be indoors, and that's it. The only thing you can do is buy the newspaper, bread, and groceries, and pharmacy. Nothing else.
So what do you think what will we take from all of this?
I'm a teacher at the moment, and I've thought a lot about education. And one thing I've thought is that subjects such as the physical education, art, or music, which are like considered like not a priority in the education of children. And we are seeing how these days these are the kind of activities that are keeping children safe and sane rather than safe. And I think that we should start thinking that maybe what is really like important for the well-being of children. Also because in Spain, children have been like the great forgotten like actors in this situation, because they have been totally like abandoned in small flats without being able to go out, and pets have had more rights than children in Spain in this situation. So I think that when we think about education and children, I think that we are understanding how important it is to be outdoors. So I think that we should start thinking like on class beyond the classroom. And well, several things. I have many ideas, but to be honest, I hadn't like verbalized them to myself even yet. So I wasn't, I don't know how to put them now in words, but yeah, personally, it has made me think a lot, and I hope that it has made everybody think a lot. Thinking is good.
Yeah, thinking is good. So let's think about this and let's do our best to keep people still sane, I guess.
Yeah.
And communication helps, so it was nice talking to you.
Thank you, Oliver.
As always. So
inviting.
hear you around, and sometime in the future, hopefully see you as well.
Yeah, ciao.
Okay, that was Anna. Thank you, Anna. It's been a long day, so let's try to wrap things up for now. I'll just quickly give you a few updates regarding some recent news. First of all, regarding testing. The Health Board has announced that they're looking to broaden the testing, which means that the guidelines that they've sent to the GPs won't include that you have to either be elderly or have a pre-existing condition to get the test. Also, the government is planning mass testing based on random but statistically relevant sample. Now, this won't include the whole population, but still a very significant amount of it to actually get like a clear overview how wide the spread actually is. They're planning to do the pilot project in Saaremaa, and then if everything goes well, they're going to implement it in the whole country. On another note, regarding the masks that recently arrived to Estonia from China, that was hailed as this, great achievement. Well, it looks like the achievement really was sort of the government wanted surgical masks for people on the front lines, but the masks that the Chinese sent us are FFP1 masks, which you can't really use on the front lines. So now they're on sale in the pharmacies. The pharmacies didn't have masks for weeks. And there's been some misinformation from different retailers about what are the actual things they're selling. I mean, they help, it's better than nothing, but there's a huge difference between surgical masks and these ones. Also, there's been conflicting information about the certification of the masks. So there's a Polish lab that assigns these certificates, but the lab has had some problem with forgeries recently. Recently being the last couple of weeks when, the demand for masks really went up. And it seems like the first certificate that the importer presented might have been the fraudulent one. Well, now the company has presented a new certificate, which, seems to be like it should be, but understandably, trust has been eroded. And yeah, it's the same masks that we just got ourselves from the pharmacy. These ones. Bio-based scientific Shandong Co. Limited Certificate of Quality. Innovation Zone, Jinan, Shandong, China. A similar thing actually happened in Finland, that the Finns were also counting on a shipment from China and they were hoping to use those masks in the hospitals. So yeah, they also didn't get what they were expecting. And that seems to be the usual case these days if you're ordering any protective gear from China. So caution is advised. And also regarding Finland, passengers via ferry won't be allowed entry into the country anymore. So starting from Saturday, only cargo carriers will be allowed entry via the ferries that run between Finland and Estonia. And this means that the exceptions won't include the so-called crucial jobs. This has also created a situation that the SynLab vehicle, well, SynLab is the medical lab that analyzes the tests here, well, the SynLab vehicle can't really go between the two countries anymore to transport the tests. So that's a problem, but this is all still very new and can change really fast. So let's see what the situation will be in a couple of days. Meanwhile, it seems like Denmark will be the first country in Europe that will start relieving some of the restrictions that they implemented mid-March when this whole self-isolating thing really became the norm. There will be a lot of attention on them, how this will work out for Denmark, and will their promising signs regarding the outbreak remain unchanged. Now, don't forget that the virus is just a virus, an infectious agent. It doesn't care whether you are a social worker or a doctor or the Prime Minister, really. We all know that by now with the example of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, who himself not that long ago didn't really seem to think that this thing was that big of a deal. Well, it looks like at least his health is getting better these days, which is good for him. But yeah, let this be a reminder that as far as this thing goes, we can all be affected by it, and really that this is just not a minor thing. As far as the infections in Estonia go, then the last days have seen quite a steady decrease. It's still too early to draw any big conclusions. Let's see what things will look like after Easter. But we just had the first day in the last 10 days without any reported new deaths. So we just have to wait and see if and how much the broader testing will change the picture. Until then, let's, keep our minds clear and take it easy. Also, if you don't know what to read, then, maybe you could try Charles Fennihoff's Pieces of Light. The guy is a psychologist who likes to work with memory. So he is writing about how we remember things, how do we tell stories to ourselves about our lives, what's the meaningful aspects to us, which details, which times, which places, and how do those stories that we tell about ourselves, how do they change in time? How do we change the stories? So it's a curious read to get to know yourself a bit better. And it will also be interesting to see that how we'll remember all of this that's going on at the moment. What are the details that will pop up and what are going to be the things that we are going to forget. Also, with today's update about the social issues, well, this will now conclude the in-depth looks that I've been doing to these big subjects. So we'll be returning to our regular, irregular programming to give you an insight about how life is going on these days here in Estonia. And instead of these long road trips, I'll be cycling more inside Tallinn itself to show you that this place has some beautiful gems inside it and you don't really have to get outside of the city to spend some great time outdoors. Until the next time, take care.